thousands of Americans, Canadians, and people from the UK are all looking for the exit, trying to leave, and the countries are now trying to find ways where they can continue taxing you or stop you leaving entirely. And the fact is that this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better, because it's only going to accelerate the amount of people that are leaving these Western countries that are turning into failing states. Now, one thing that is really fucking annoying is the fact that you keep seeing these populist politicians that crop up. They crop up on the left and they crop up on the right, and they're very divisive figures, and they tend to polarize their voters, and they tend to have slogans, and they tend to talk in a way that is very direct and makes their voters feel good about what they're going to do. But I want to use the Canadian election campaign that is going on right now as an example. You know, a lot of people want to believe that a lot is going to change. Like, oh my God, if Mark Carney gets in, it's the end of the world. Oh my God, if Pierre Poilievre gets in, it's the end of the world. But the reality is nothing is much change. That's what people just won't admit. I mean, it's hopium is what it is. People just have this hope that, oh, if I just cling to this leader like Donald Trump or Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney, that everything's just going to be okay for me. And the reality is the power structures remain. The open air corruption remains. I mean, look at Le Pen in France and what just happened there. Look at Trevor Milton being pardoned by Donald Trump. I mean, people who support these people, they just ignore it. They just ignore that that's happened. Oh, it's okay. He's doing this, which is really good. When you look at what is going on right now, countries know that more and more people want to leave. They know that the country is collapsing, and they're elites. These people who are in charge, do you think that they honestly know what it's like to be an average person in the economy? Don't have a clue. They just act like it. They are trained actors, essentially. Over time, you begin to realize that, and especially when you leave. And a lot of people from the United States that I speak to, some of my friends, they all left to get away from it. And if you ask them, you know, what's the difference between the two political parties in the United States, they'll give you a very different answer to somebody in the United States who will say, oh, they are so different, you know. It's like chalk and cheese. They're very similar. And that doesn't just go for the United States. That goes for most Western countries. But here's the thing. Western countries are starting to realize that more and more people are looking for the door. And instead of trying to change their ways, trying to reduce the size of government, trying to not be so authoritarian, trying to not tell you what to do, they're doing the complete opposite. They're doubling down. They're just going more and more authoritarian. A great example of this is the buy Canadian and buy American. It's so stupid. You only have to look at the reality of wealth. It's not how many currency units you have in your bank account. It's what you can buy with those currency units. So if you're limiting yourself, especially to higher priced goods, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're actually making yourself poorer. And that is exactly what a lot of Americans and Canadians are doing right now with this buy American and buy Canadian thing. It is just a virtue signaling thing, essentially. It's not going to make any difference, and the political elites are just using it because it makes voters emotional and feel like they're participating and doing something, when the reality is they're doing nothing. And the real thing that they should be doing is getting to the streets and protesting how badly corrupt these governments are, but instead they just want to go to their local store and sabotage, you know, average people in both countries. I mean, it's so stupid. It's unbelievable. But to a lot of people outside of those two countries, it's pretty obvious to see that. And I don't have a political bias. Who gets elected, to me, it doesn't bother me that much, because the reality is, like I said, the two parties in both countries are very similar. I mean, I have seen the changing government in the UK back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over the past 2 decades, and the country's decline just continues and continues continues and continues. Each politician comes forward with a new platform of how they're going to make things great, but once they get into that position of power, the amount of money that they're able to swindle and take just becomes eye-watering to the point that they can't ignore it anymore, and they just bow down to the elites and do what they tell them. And that's just really what happens, because the decline is just continuing. These authoritarian governments, especially the United States right now, and I don't care if you like Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, it's not about that. You've got to be able to put that aside and look at things objectively instead of saying, I hate Trump or I love Trump. No, you have to be able to look at everything independent. Look at what's actually happening and not who the actual person who said it is. And if you agree with that statement without knowing who said it, then actually, yeah, maybe you are thinking critically, but the majority of people just say, oh, well, if Elon said it or if Donald Trump said it, it must be true. And the facts are that they say a lot of things that are complete bull. And they constantly contradict themselves. And I'm not taking aim at them, because all politicians do it. It is a thing that is a prerequisite to be a politician. But the problem is people aren't able to actually look at things and think independently anymore. They have to be told what they're going to think. I know a lot of people won't agree with what I say in this video, and I'm okay with that, as long as you came to that opinion and you didn't just sit there and go, well, I don't like that guy, so I don't like what he says, full stop. It's just so stupid. I mean, this is what it comes to in 2025. And the reason what drives me to do these rants, to do these videos, is because the thing is, these countries do matter to a certain extent, because they are dangerous enough that they could start World War III, or they could just make things incredibly worse for the rest of the world that is doing just fine whilst they fight among each other. And, you know, it is just so fucking annoying how people just can't understand the simple thing that tariffs are a tax, and they're a tax paid by the importing country. So if the United States is imposing 25% tariffs on the whole world, well, the American taxpayer is going to pick that up. People don't actually realize that if you eliminate income tax, well, that just means inflation's going to go up. You know, the problem is people don't understand what wealth is. They don't understand how wealth is created, and it's actually the amount of goods and services that you have access to. It's about increasing competition. That's how you see prices come down. You don't see prices come down by governments implementing tariffs or income tax cuts. I mean, income tax cuts are as inflationary as government stimulus, like direct checks to people's door. It's just one is peddled by the conservative side of the aisle and the other's peddled by the liberal side of the aisle. Now, you can influence the way people invest, the way businesses invest, by doing different tax cuts. The problem is people don't realize that the governments have got so big in these countries that they are the problem in themselves, and those people coming to the surface to try and represent this absolutely huge government, well, they're part of the problem unless they're promising that they're actually going to shrink government. I mean, at the same time as the Doge team in the United States is doing a lot of good things and they're shrinking government, they're also increasing the size of government at the same time by doing things like tariffs. I mean, who do you think is going to administer all of these confusing tariffs? It's going to take a hell of a lot of people. And the problem is that people just don't see that at all. And government getting so big and the cost of corruption and where all this money is flowing is part of the issue. It's getting government out of the way. It's reducing red tape and regulation. And I really don't hear any politicians saying they're going to do that. And I just wouldn't believe them even if they did, because I've learned the hard way with politicians over my life, and I'm not even that old compared to a lot of people who still just blindly believe these politicians. I always just think, prepare for the worst, hope for the best with a politician. With a politician, I'm not going to believe anything that comes out of their mouth, especially on the campaign trail, until they actually do it and implement it. And likely there is going to be a whole raft of things that actually contradict other policies that they have. Global recession has been looming for a long time. The United States is a falling superpower. That is obvious if you look at history and you just think critically about it instead of getting emotional, even if you're from the United States. I think it's very important to think about these things right now and prepare for the downfall of the United States, because then you can position yourself in a way to try and benefit from that downfall. And the time to prepare for this downfall is now, and it's not in 5 or 10 years. I mean, if you are below 40 years old, you probably are going to see the complete downfall of the United States and the replacing of the United States as the world superpower. I mean, it's already dwindling on the world stage, and it's not just because of the tariffs. I mean, the United States actually has a lot of things going for it in terms of an economy, but the problem is it's the actual governments. As usual, people fail to separate the two. They think, oh, nasty Americans, when no, it's nasty government. And they think, oh, it's nasty Canadians. No, it's nasty government. And they just get whipped into the hysteria and the polarization, which is exactly what these populist politicians feed on. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out the video that is coming on your screen right now, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.